Hello everyone, and welcome to the fictional vortex. So we are back with an interesting movie on what if Naruto was the vampire god ranger, the lord of the psycho rangers. But before we start, I just want to remind you to please subscribe to my channel and hit the like button if you enjoy my content. Let's start the story. Chapter 1. Crimson Awakening. Moonlight spilled across Konoha's rooftops, painting the village in silvery hues as a solitary figure bounded between buildings with practiced ease. Naruto Uzumaki moved with uncharacteristic silence, his normally bright orange attire exchanged for the standard issue Jonin blacks he'd grudgingly adopted since his promotion 6 months ago. At 20, he'd grown into his frame, lean but powerful, with his father's height and jawline tempered by hints of his mother's delicate features. The mission scroll weighed heavy in his pocket, a solo reconnaissance assignment just beyond Fire Country's borders, classified enough that even Kakashi had delivered the details with uncharacteristic sobriety. Strange disappearances, unusual chakra signatures, bodies drained of both blood and chakra. Something's watching me, Naruto murmured, pausing atop the Hokage monument. His sensory abilities had sharpened dramatically since the war, beyond what even Sage Mode had offered. Tonight they thrummed with warning, an electric prickle across his skin that couldn't be dismissed as paranoia. The kunai whistled through the air where his head had been a half-second earlier. Naruto dropped flat against the stone, enhanced senses catching the faint scent of unfamiliar poison coating the blade as it embedded into the fourth Hokage's sculpted cheek. Impressive reflexes, came a voice like crushed velvet over broken glass. The reports weren't exaggerating. The figure emerged from shadows that seemed to bend unnaturally around their form, tall, wrapped in fabrics so deeply black they absorbed rather than reflected the moonlight. Their face remained obscured beneath a porcelain mask bearing no village insignia, only a crimson spiral pattern that seemed to shift subtly when viewed from different angles. Naruto formed a shadow clone without hand signs, a technique he'd perfected through obsessive practice. Anbu, nothing so provincial. The attacker's laughter held no warmth. I've come to tase the blood of Uzumaki before it awakens. Naruto's clone circled right while he feinted left, Rasengan forming instinctively in his palm. The technique had become as natural as breathing, requiring mere thought rather than concentration. Don't know what you're talking about, but threatening my village was your first mistake. Your village? The masked figure sidestepped the Rasengan with unnatural fluidity. How quaint. You still think so small. The attacker moved with impossible speed, hands forming seals Naruto had never encountered, complex, ancient patterns that made the air itself seem to warp. Blood release. Crimson extraction. Pain erupted through Naruto's system as something pulled at him from within, not his chakra, but something deeper, more primal. The sensation bypassed Kurama's protective influence entirely. What is this? Naruto gasped, dropping to one knee as crimson tendrils began to emerge from his skin, drawn toward the attacker's outstretched hand. Your heritage calling to you. The figure replied, voice almost reverent now. The seal is fracturing exactly as predicted. The blood moon approaches, and with it, your awakening. Rage flared through Naruto's system, a different quality than he'd ever experienced. Not Kurama's wild, destructive fury, but something cold, calculating, and ancient. His vision sharpened dramatically, the night suddenly as clear as day, but tinted in shades of red. The attacker's masked face tilted. Fascinating. The dormant genes expressed themselves already. I don't know what game you're playing, Naruto snarled, his voice resonating with unusual depth, but it ends now. He launched forward, faster than he'd ever moved without Kurama's cloak, his right hand instinctively forming not a Rasengan but something new. A swirling vortex of crimson energy that seemed to draw ambient chakra from the very air. The sensation was intoxicating, power flowing through pathways he hadn't known existed within his body. The masked figure barely avoided the strike, their shoulder grazing the technique. Where contact occurred, the black fabric disintegrated, revealing not skin but crystalline scales underneath. First blood to you, descendant of Uzumaki. The attacker conceded, sounding pleased rather than concerned. But the test continues. 3 more attackers emerged from distortions in the air itself, similar. Masked figures bearing the same spiral pattern, each wielding weapons that seemed to absorb rather than reflect the moonlight. Friends of yours. Naruto created a defensive perimeter of shadow clones, mind racing through tactical options. The village remained peaceful below, unaware of the confrontation happening above the Hokage monument. He needed to keep it that way. Siblings, after a fashion. The original attacker stepped back. We are harvesters. For millennia, we have sought the return of the vampire god. Tonight, we confirm our search has ended. The word, vampire, triggered something deep within Naruto's memory, not his own recollection, but something older, embedded in his cellular structure. Images flashed before him. A crimson moon hanging low over an ancient battlefield. Armored figures commanding forces of shadow and blood, a crystalline throne atop a mountain of sacrifices. I'm no god, Naruto countered, forcing away the intrusive visions. And whatever you think I am, you've got the wrong guy. The blood does not lie. The harvester gestured, and his companions attacked in perfect synchronization. Naruto dodged the first strike, a blade that hummed with strange energy. Only to find the second attacker anticipating his movement. A palm strike connected with his chest, sending unfamiliar energy coursing through his system, energy that seemed designed specifically to disrupt his chakra pathways. Pain blossomed as internal networks he'd never been conscious of suddenly flared to life. He staggered backward, blood trickling from the corner of his mouth. It tasted different somehow, richer, charged with potential. Your awakening can be guided or chaotic, the leader called. Surrender to the process, and we will ease your transition. Not my style, Naruto gasped, wiping blood from his lips. The moment his fingers touched the crimson liquid, something fundamental shifted. Power surged through him. Not chakra, not Kurama's influence, but something ancient and primal. His canines lengthened perceptibly, vision sharpening further until he could count individual threads in his attacker's garments from meters away. Most disconcertingly, he could suddenly sense their blood, pulsing, flowing, singing to him with promises of strength if only he would take it. What's happening to me? He whispered, but part of him already knew. Something say, Aled within his lineage was awakening, something his parents had never mentioned, perhaps had never known themselves. Embrace it, urged the leader. The vampire god stirs within you. Naruto had FACED identity crises before, learning of Kurama, discovering his parentage, accepting his role as child of prophecy. But this felt fundamentally different, a challenge to his very humanity. He reached instinctively for Kurama's chakra, seeking the familiar partnership that had carried him through countless battles. Kit, something's wrong, the fox's voice resonated within his mindscape. Your chakra network is changing, adapting. I cannot interfere with this process without causing damage. Great time for a non-intervention policy, Naruto muttered as he narrowly avoided another strike. This one leaving a shallow cut across his forearm. Blood welled from the wound, but instead of dripping downward, it moved with purpose, swirling around his arm like a living crimson armor before being absorbed back into his skin. The wound sealed instantly, faster even than Kurama's healing factor had ever managed. The blood remembers, the lead harvester intoned. Even after generations of dormancy, Naruto's tactical awareness expanded dramatically. He could suddenly perceive the minute muscle tensions telegraphing his opponent's next moves, could smell the chemical components of their weapons, could hear the subtle variations in their heartbeats. Combat awareness beyond anything he'd experienced flooded his consciousness. He moved without conscious thought, body responding to instincts he hadn't known he possessed. His right hand extended, and the nearest harvester froze mid-attack, blood visibly straining against the confines of their veins. Blood release. Crimson command, Naruto heard himself say. Though he'd never known such a technique. The harvester collapsed, writhing as their blood rebelled against them. Horror and fascination warred within him. How am I doing this? The ancient technique's return, the lead harvester sounded ecstatic beneath his mask. The seal weakens with each passing moment. The remaining harvesters redoubled their assault, no longer testing but attacking with lethal intent. Their movements blurred with supernatural speed, forcing Naruto to rely on his new senses just to survive. A blade pierced his shoulder, another sliced across his thigh. Each wound should have been debilitating, but the pain transformed instantly into cold clarity. His blood responded differently with each injury, sometimes hardening into weapon-like projections. other times forming protective barriers, occasionally even lashing out like whips toward his attackers. Enough! Naruto roared, his voice carrying harmonic undertones that cracked the stone beneath his feet. Whatever this is, whatever you think I am, you don't get to decide my fate. He slammed his palm against the ground, and crimson energy erupted outward in a perfect circle. Where it touched the harvesters, they froze as though time itself had stopped for them alone. The leader alone remained mobile, stepping back with what appeared to be satisfaction. The first threshold is crossed, he announced. We will withdraw, but know this, Uzumaki Naruto, the blood moon rises in 3 months' time. By then, the dormant god within you will fully awaken, with or without our intervention. And if I refuse this awakening? Naruto challenged, struggling to regulate his heightened senses and the predatory instincts now surging through him. Denial changes nothing. The celestial alignment approaches. Your bloodline responds. The harvester reached up to remove his mask, revealing not a human face but a crystalline structure vaguely approximating human features. We are but harbingers. Others will come. Some to worship, others to destroy. The dimensions themselves will bend toward your awakening. Before Naruto could respond, reality distorted around the harvesters. They stepped backward into nothing, disappearing along with their frozen companions. The night fell silent once more, as though the entire encounter had been imagination. Only the lingering taste of copper in his mouth and the strange new awareness flowing through his veins confirmed the reality of what had transpired. Kurama, Naruto whispered, retreating to his mindscape. What was that? The massive fox regarded him with uncharacteristic uncertainty. Something beyond even my knowledge, Kit. Your chakra has changed. There are pathways active now that have never manifested before. These abilities, this talk of vampires and gods, it can't be real. Your mother once mentioned ancient Uzumaki legends, ***, Kurama mused. Tales of ancestors who commanded blood itself, who walked between worlds. I dismissed them as clan mythology, but now. A flicker of movement in the physical world pulled Naruto back to awareness. His hand moved automatically, kunai at the ready before conscious thought caught up. Naruto-kun, Hinata's voice carried softly across the monument. She emerged from the shadows, her traditional Hyuga attire replaced by form-fitting blacks that Naruto had never seen her wear. Are you all right? I sensed disturbances in the chakra flows around the monument. Naruto quickly wiped the remaining blood from his mouth, uncertain how to explain what had just happened. Just some trouble, nothing I couldn't handle. Her Byakugan activated without hand signs, a level of control she'd mastered only recently. Your chakra network, she began, then stopped abruptly. What about it? Naruto asked, suddenly self-conscious under her penetrating gaze. It's different, she replied, stepping closer. There are active pathways I've never seen before in any human. And something else. Quote, before he could react, she reached toward the cut on his arm that had already healed, her fingertips brushing the unmarked skin. Where she touched, both her fingers and his arm momentarily darkened, as though shadows briefly passed between them. She withdrew her hand with a sharp intake of breath. So it's true. What's true? Hinata, do you know something about this? The normally reserved Kunoichi glanced around, confirming they were alone. Not here. We need somewhere private. There are family scrolls one need to show you. Ancient histories the Hyuga have guarded for generations. Histories about what? Naruto pressed. About the blood clans, she answered, her voice dropping to barely a whisper. The Uzumaki, the Hyuga, and others, and their connection to beings called rangers who traveled between dimensions. Rangers, Naruto repeated, the term resonating strangely with his altered blood. Like guardians, sometimes conquerors. Hinata's eyes reflected the moonlight with unusual intensity. The scrolls speak of a leader, the Crimson Ranger, who commanded the others through blood bonds. Some accounts call him the vampire god. Naruto's hands clenched involuntarily. And you think that has something to do with what's happening to me? I don't know, Hinata admitted. But we need to find out before. A distant explosion interrupted her, flames erupting from Konoha's eastern gate. Shouts of alarm echoed across the village as emergency protocols activated. Damn it, Naruto muttered, conflict evident in his expression. This conversation isn't over, but go. Hinata nodded. I'll gather what we need. Meet me at the old Uzumaki shrine in the forest when this is contained. Naruto hesitated only briefly before leaping toward the disturbance, forcing his enhanced senses to focus on the task at hand rather than the revelations spinning through his mind. The attack on Konoha's Stern Gate proved to be more than a simple border incursion. 3 cloaked figures, their faces obscured by hoods rather than masks, wielded abilities that defied conventional shinobi classification. They didn't form hand signs but moved with fluid grace, drawing patterns in the air that manifested as tangible attacks. Dimensional Release. Void Scatter. Called the tallest attacker, voice distinctly feminine despite its power. Where her fingers traced patterns, reality itself seemed to fracture, creating unstable pockets that swallowed anything they touched. Buildings, weapons, even jutsu directed their way. Konoha's defenders had established a perimeter, but conventional attacks proved ineffective against enemies who could apparently step sideways through space itself, appearing and disappearing at will. Naruto arrived to find Shikamaru coordinating the defense, his shadow possession technique stretched to its limits trying to predict where the attackers would materialize next. "About time you showed up," the Nara genius called, sweat beading on his forehead from concentration. "These aren't ordinary enemies. Standard combat protocols are useless." "I'm noticing that," Naruto replied, instinctively scanning the battlefield with his enhanced senses. The attacker's movements suddenly became predictable. He could perceive faint distortions in the air moments before they appeared. Like ripples in fabric before a tear manifested. "They'll emerge there, and there," he pointed to 3 locations simultaneously. In approximately 7 seconds, Shikamaru's eyebrows rose slightly. "Since when can you? Never mind. If you're right, we need to coordinate the counterattack now." As predicted, the 3 attackers materialized exactly where Naruto had indicated. Prepared this time, Konoha's forces launched a synchronized assault. Sakura's chakra-enhanced fist connected with one attacker, sending them crashing through a partially collapsed building. Size Ink beasts surrounded the second, while Shikamaru's shadows finally captured the third. "How did you anticipate our emergence point?" demanded the captured attacker, voice betraying genuine surprise. Naruto stepped forward, acutely aware that his senses continued operating at heightened levels. The cloaked figure's blood called to him. Not human blood, but something similar yet fundamentally different in composition. "You're not from this dimension," Naruto stated with certainty, the knowledge surfacing from somewhere deep within his altered consciousness. The attacker's hood fell back, revealing feet. Yours that appeared human at first glance but possessed subtle wrongness, eyes set slightly too far apart, skin with an iridescent quality that shifted under the emergency lights. "The hunter speaks truth," she said, addressing her companions rather than her captors. "The prophecy manifests. The Crimson One recognizes dimensional travelers." "That's not a title I've accepted," Naruto countered, epping closer despite warnings from his comrades to maintain distance. "Why are you attacking Konoha?" "We do not attack," she corrected. "We announce. The boundaries between realms thin as the blood moon approaches. The Nexus stirs from slumber." Similar cryptic warnings to what the Harvesters had delivered, yet these beings seemed fundamentally different, less reverential, more analytical in their approach. "The Nexus will require its rangers," added another attacker, this one managing to dissolve Size Ink restraints through some unseen technique. "The Psycho Crystal awakens. It calls for worthy vessels." Enough riddles. Naruto's patience waned, the predatory aspects of his new abilities urging aggressive action. He forced the impulse down, maintaining control. "Either explain clearly or leave my village in peace." The third attacker, recovering from Sakura's devastating punch, laughed bitterly. "Peace is precisely what hangs in the balance, vampire god. The dimensional barriers weaken. Without the rangers to maintain the boundaries, all worlds collapse into chaos." "I never asked for this role," Naruto challenged. "None of the worthy ever do," replied the leader, her foe. Beginning to shimmer as though preparing to depart. "Seek the crystal. Claim your birthright. The alternative is annihilation across all realities." Before anyone could respond, the 3 attackers simultaneously traced identical patterns in the air. Reality warped around them, and they vanished without trace or trail to follow. Sakura was at Naruto's side immediately, medical training prompting her to check for injuries. "Are you hurt? What were they talking about?" Since when do you have interdimensional enemies? Apparently since tonight. Naruto sighed. The adrenaline, or whatever its equivalent was in his altered system, beginning to fade. The heightened senses remained, however, every heartbeat and blood flow around him registered with uncomfortable clarity. Shikamaru's analytical gaze missed nothing. Something's different about you. Your movements, your sensory predictions, even your chakra signature has subtle variations from yesterday. Naruto hesitated. These were his closest friends and allies. People who had stood beside him through war and peace. Yet the transformations occurring within him felt intensely personal, potentially dangerous, and far too complex to explain when he barely understood them himself. It's complicated, he finally offered. And I don't have answers yet, just a lot of questions. That's not like you. Sakura frowned. Medical chakra. Scanning him subtly, a technique she'd perfected for examining stubborn patients who downplayed their injuries. Her eyes widened slightly. Naruto, your cellular structure is changing. At a molecular level, I need to speak with Hinata. He replied. Decision made. She has information that might explain what's happening. Hinata. Shikamaru raised an eyebrow. What would she know about interdimensional travelers? Clan histories, Naruto explained vaguely. Look, I promise I'll brief everyone once I understand more myself. For now, strengthen the village defenses and alert me if anything else unusual happens. Despite clear reservations, they trusted him enough not to press further. After confirming no civilian casualties had occurred during the attack, Naruto headed toward the forest shrine where Hinata waited. Questions multiplying with each passing moment. The Uzumaki shrine had stood abandoned for generations, hidden deep within Konoha's surrounding forest. Ancient eels still pulsed with dormant energy along its foundations, recognition patterns that supposedly admitted only those with Uzumaki blood. Naruto had visited occasionally over the years, seeking connection to his mother's clan. But the sealed archives beneath the shrine had always remained inaccessible. Tonight, the moment his foot touched the first stone step, the entire structure hummed to life. Symbols etched into the weathered columns glowed with crimson energy, responding to something changed within his blood. Hinata waited inside, surrounded by scrolls she had apparently retrieved from some hidden Hyuga repository. She had exchanged her blacks for traditional clan robes, but with subtle modifications Naruto had never seen before, shadow weave patterns embroidered along the hems, and symbols matching those now illuminating the shrine walls. You felt it too, she stated rather than asked, Byakugan active and focused on his approach. The awakening. What do you know about this, Hinata? Naruto kept his distance, uncertain how the strange blood abilities might affect someone near him. The predatory instincts had subsided to background whispers, but remained present, noting the rhythm of her heartbeat with uncomfortable precision. The Hyuga have served as record keepers for millennia, she began, unrolling an ancient scroll across the shrine's central altar. Before the hidden villages, before the Sage of Six Paths became legend, there existed powers beyond chakra as we understand it. The scroll depicted humanoid figures in stylized armor, each bearing distinct colors and patterns. At their center stood a crimson-armored figure, larger than the others, with a helmet featuring distinctive fanged elements. The Dimensional Guardians, Hinata continued, her voic taking on a formal cadence unlike her usual gentle speech. In some accounts they were called Rangers, warriors chosen by cosmic forces to maintain balance between realities. In others, they were gods who walked between worlds. And this one, Naruto indicated the central crimson figure. The vampire god, Hinata confirmed. Commander of the Psycho Rangers, who drew power from blood bonds with his chosen warriors. Some texts name him Destroyer, others Savior. All agree he was neither human nor demon, but something that transcended such categories. That doesn't explain why these abilities are manifesting in me, Naruto argued. Though something deep in his altered DNA recognized the truth in her words. Hinata unrolled a second scroll, this one bearing the distinctive spiral of the Uzumaki clan alongside the Hyuga flame symbol. Our clans were not always separate. In the most ancient times, the Uzumaki, Hyuga, Kagaya, and others descended from those who served the dimensional beings. When the Rangers departed our realm, they left behind bloodline limits, fragments of their power adapted to human biology. You're saying my clan, Our clans aren't fully human. The concept should have seemed absurd. Yet it explains so many anomalies. The Uzumaki's unnaturally strong life force and unique chakra, the Hyuga's visual prowess that defied conventional understanding of dojutsu. I am saying our ancestors were changed by their service, Hinata clarified. And certain bloodlines retained stronger connections to the original powers. She hesitated, then continued with uncharacteristic boldness. The Hyuga scrolls speak of prophecy, that when dimensional barriers weakened, the blood of Uzumaki would awaken to its original purpose. The heir would reclaim the vampire god's mantle, to prevent catastrophic convergence of realities. And you believe that's me? Naruto challenged, though the evidence of his transformation grew more difficult to deny. Because some abilities appeared after I was attacked. I believe something significant is happening, Hinata answered carefully. And I've been preparing for this possibility longer than you realize. With fluid grace that spoke of years of practice, she formed hand seals Naruto had never seen before, not traditional shinobi signs, but complex patterns that seemed to bend shadows around her form. Shadow style. Umbral manifestation. The darkness of the shrine coalesced around her, forming what appeared to be spectral armor that encased her in segments of deepest black. Where moonlight filtering through the shrine windows touched the manifestation, the surfaces shimmered with purple iridescence. What is that technique? Naruto whispered, his enhanced vision perceiving layers of energy unlike any jutsu he'd encountered. The Hyuga public techniques focus on the gentle fist and Byakugan, Hinata explained, her voice echoing slightly through the shadow manifestation. But a secret lineage within the clan maintained the old ways, the shadow arts that once complemented the vampire god's abilities. She approached slowly, the shadow armor moving fluidly with each step. For generations, one Hyuga in each era trained in these forgotten techniques, awaiting the prophecy's fulfillment. And that's you. Naruto struggled to reconcile this revelation with the shy, gentle Hinata he had known for years. My mother began my training before she died, Hinata confirmed. When my father deemed me too weak for clan leadership, it provided perfect cover to continue these studies in secret. The elders saw only failure in conventional techniques, never realizing I followed a different path. The quiet pride in her voice struck Naruto deeply. He had always believed in Hinata's strength, even when others dismissed her. Learning she had mastered an entirely separate discipline in secret only reinforced his admiration. So the prophecy claims I'm supposed to become this vampire god, and command other rangers to prevent dimensional collapse. Naruto summarized, trying to process the implications. And you've been training all this time to be one of these rangers? The Shadow Ranger, she nodded. Though prophecies are never straightforward. The texts speak of trials, of a crystal that must be recovered, of blood bonds that must be formed willingly rather than through coercion. The attackers mentioned a psycho crystal. Naruto recalled, said it was awakening. Hinata's expression sharpened with interest. The crystal is key to everything. Legend holds it contains the essence of the original Rangers, their knowledge, abilities, and connection to the dimensional nexus. She dismissed the shadow armor with a subtle gesture, returning to her normal appearance. If beings from other dimensions seek you out, if your blood abilities activate further, then the crystal must be found before others claim it. And if I don't want this responsibility? Naruto challenged, though even as he spoke the words, he recognized their hollowness. When had he ever walked away from protecting those who needed him? Hinata's smile held gentle understanding. Then you wouldn't be Naruto Uzumaki. Why? I've never turned from difficult paths when others depended on you. A comfortable silence settled between them, the ease of two people who understood each other's hearts without requiring words. Yuto found himself studying her with new perspective. The confidence she displayed now hadn't appeared overnight, it had developed gradually over years, hidden beneath traditional Hyuga reserve. These shadow techniques, he finally asked. How do they interact with the blood abilities I'm developing? According to the texts, they're complementary, Hinata explained. The vampire god commanded blood, both his own and others. The Shadow Ranger manipulated darkness itself, creating pathways between dimensions that only rangers could traverse. She extended her hand, palm upward. Small tendrils of darkness swirled above her skin. If the prophecies are accurate, my abilities should resonate with yours, creating a connection. The implication carried weight beyond tactical advantages. A blood bond, as she had described earlier, suggested something far more intimate than standard shinobi partnerships. We should test the theory, Naruto decided, curiosity overcoming caution. He extended his own hand, watching as his blood responded instinctively, forming a thin crimson layer across his palm. Hinata's breath caught slightly, but she showed no hesitation as their hands met. The moment contact occurred, energy surged between them, his blood calling to her shadows, her darkness reaching for his crimson power. Their chakras intertwined in patterns neither had experienced before, forming connections on levels beyond physical. Visions flashed through Naruto's consciousness, glimpses of ancient battles fought across starlit voids, of crimson and shadow warriors moving in perfect synchronization, of powers that could reshape reality itself when properly aligned. They separated simultaneously, both gasping at the intensity of the experience. That was. Naruto struggled to find adequate words. Perfect resonance, Hinata finished, eyes wide with wonder. The texts described it, but experiencing it is overwhelming. Before either could process the implications further, a tremendous crash echoed from the village. They rushed to the shrine entrance to see an ominous purple light erupting from near Konoha's center. Another attack. Naruto's enhanced senses stretched toward the disturbance. Detecting familiar signatures, Shikamaru, Sakura, others, engaged in combat with something that registered as fundamentally wrong, an aberration in reality itself. No, Hinata's Byakugan activated, focusing on the disturbance. Something worse, a dimensional tear, exactly what the prophecies warned would happen as barriers weakened. Then we need to seal it, Naruto concluded. Decision made despite the uncertainties still clouding his transformation. Can your shadow techniques help with that? Theoretically, Hinata nodded, but only if paired with your blood abilities. Neither power alone can mend dimensional damage. Then we work together. Naruto extended his hand again, this time in partnership rather than experiment. Hinata took it without hesitation. Always. The simple word carried years of unspoken devotion, bringing warmth even amidst crisis. Something about the Ranger awakening seemed to have freed Hinata from her traditional reserve, all owing the strength that had always existed within her to manifest more openly. As they raced toward the disturbance, Naruto found himself oddly grateful despite the chaos. If assuming the mantle of the Empire God meant discovering new dimensions to people he thought he knew completely, perhaps the transformation offered unexpected gifts alongside its burdens. The dimensional tear manifested as a vertical wound in reality, a jagged purple gash floating 10 meters above Konoha's central plaza. It pulsed with unstable energy, occasionally disgorging strange crystalline shards that exploded on impact, transforming anything they touched into distorted, impossible geometries. Konoha's defenders had established a perimeter, evacuating civilians while specialized units attempted to counteract the anomaly using sealing techniques. Nothing proved effective. Conventional chakra simply dissipated when it contacted the tear's energies. Naruto, Sakura called when she spotted his approach. Street Andard containment protocols are failing. Kakashi-sensei is retrieving forbidden sealing scrolls from the Hokage archives, but we need to minimize damage until then. We have an alternative approach, Naruto replied, indicating Hinata beside him. The statement drew curious glances from those nearby. While everyone respected Hinata's abilities, few would have expected her to possess specialized knowledge for this unprecedented threat. Shikamaru assessed them both with calculating eyes. You know something about this phenomenon. Enough to attempt containment, Hinata answered with quiet confidence that surprised those who knew her primarily as the reserved Hyuga heiress. Naruto scanned the area, his enhanced senses detecting subtle patterns in the tear's fluctuations. We need space to work. Keep everyone back at least 30 meters. Though clearly puzzled by the request, Shikamaru trusted Naruto's judgment enough to order the perimeter expanded. As other shinobi focused on acting civilians and containing damage from the crystalline shards, Naruto and Hinata positioned themselves directly beneath the dimensional wound. How do we do this? Naruto asked, feeling his blue D responding to the tear's energy, simultaneously repelled and attracted, like opposite polarities of a magnet. We bridge our powers, Hinata explained, the formal cadence returning to her voice as she accessed inherited knowledge. Blood creates the structure, shadow weaves the binding. She moved fluidly through the complex forms of her secret shadow arts, darkness gathering around her hands in intricate patterns. When I establish the shadow framework, you'll need to infuse it with blood energy, not chakra, but the new power awakening within you. Naruto nodded, instinctively understanding what she described despite having no formal training. Something embedded in his transforming DNA recognized the necessary techniques, ancient knowledge surfacing from cellular memory. Shadow style. Dimensional lattice, Hinata called. Completing her sequence. Threads of pure darkness extended from her fingertips, weaving an elaborate three-dimensional pattern beneath the tear. The shadow construct rose toward the wound, expanding to match its dimensions exactly. Where conventional chakra had failed to interact with the anomaly, Hinata's shadows adhered to its edges, creating a stable framework. Now, Naruto, she called, strain evident in her voice as she maintained the complex technique. Naruto extended both hands toward the tear, surrendering to instincts he didn't fully understand. Blood release. Crimson binding. Power surged from deep within, not from his chakra network, but from his very blood. Crimson energy flowed from his palms in spiraling patterns, intertwining with Hinata's shadow lattice. Where the two energies merged, they transformed into something new, a pulsing matrix of dark red light that adhered to the tear's unstable edges. It's working, Hinata gasped, sweat beading on her forehead from concentration. The resonance is stabilizing the breach. The watching shinobi murmured in confusion and wonder, witnessing techniques unlike anything in their experience. Naruto barely registered their presence, his consciousness expanding into the tear itself, perceiving the vast dimensional void beyond, an endless expanse where realities overlapped like pages in a cosmic book. There's something coming through, he warned, sensing a presence approaching from the other side. Something large. Before Hinata could respond, a massive crystalline appendage thrust through the narrowing tear, a limb resembling an insectoid claw but composed entirely of translucent purple crystal. It thrashed violently, seeking purchase in their reality. We need to close it now, Naruto called, redoubling his efforts. The blood energy flowing from him intensified, turning from liquid streamers to solid crimson constructs that physically forced the tear's edges together. Hinata's shadow weaving adapted instantly, changing from passive framework to active binding. Shadow style. Umbral constriction. The darkness tightened around the dimensional wound like stitches closing a cut. The crystalline appendage thrashed more desperately, but found itself trapped between realities as the tear rapidly contracted. With a sound like reality itself tearing, a noise that existed beyond normal acoustic range but registered painfully in the consciousness of everyone present, the dimensional breach collapsed inward. The crystalline limb, caught in the closure, shattered into countless fragments that dissolved into motes of light before touching the ground. Silence fell across the plaza as the anomaly disappeared completely, leaving only scorched pavement where it had manifested. Naruto and Hinata remained in their positions, hands extended, powers still visibly manifesting around them, his blood energy swirling in crimson patterns, her shadows undulating with unusual vitality. What was that? Sakura finally voiced the question everyone present wondered. Naruto lowered his hands slowly, the crimson energy reluctantly subsiding. The exertion should have been exhausting, yet he felt energized, as though the technique had awakened even more dormant potential within him. The beginning, he answered simply, knowing fuller explanations would need to wait until he understood more himself. Hinata dismissed her shadow techniques with practiced grace, returning to her normal appearance, though those watching closely might have noticed subtle changes in her bearing. A newfound confidence in her posture that hadn't been present before. The tear is closed, she confirmed, but it's only a symptom of larger problems. The dimensional barriers continue weakening. You two have some explaining to do, Shikamaru observed, expression caught between tactical assessment and genuine concern for his friends. Those weren't any techniques I've ever seen documented. We'll brief everyone properly, Naruto promised, after we've had time to organize what we know. His enhanced senses detected approaching figures, Anbu units responding to the crisis, foe. Load by Kakashi carrying sealed scrolls that would no longer be necessary. Explanations would be unavoidable, but required careful consideration. The implications extended far beyond Konoha, Potenti. Ally affecting all realities if the warnings about dimensional collapse proved accurate. We should return to the shrine, Hinata suggested quietly. There's more in the ancient texts we need to review before proceeding. Naruto nodded agreement, turning to Sakura and Shikamaru. Can you handle the aftermath here? We need a few hours to research critical information about these phenomena. Though clearly reluctant, they agreed. Whatever had just transpired clearly fell outside standard shinobi protocols, and Naruto's track record had earned their trust. As they prepared to depart, Naruto felt a familiar presence approaching rapidly, a chakra signature he recognized instantly despite its relative rarity in the village. Naruto, Hinata, Karen Uzumaki landed nearby, her usual stern demeanor, nor replaced by barely contained excitement. I felt it, the blood awakening. It's really happening. Hinata tensed slightly beside him, though whether from surprise at the interruption or something else, Naruto couldn't determine. You know about this? He asked his distant clan relative, with whom he'd established cordial if not close relations since the war. Of course I know. Karen adjusted her glasses. Red eyes bright with academic fervor. The Uzumaki were caretakers of dimensional knowledge for generations. Why do you think our sealing techniques were so advanced? We were preparing for precisely this eventuality. She thrust a worn leather case toward him. I've been researching the ancient texts since I first sensed the blood stirring in your chakra months ago. You'll need these. To locate the psycho crystal before the convergence accelerates. Naruto accepted the case cautiously, feeling the contents resonate with his altered blood even through the sealed container. How did you know to bring these now? Karen's smile combined academic pride with something deeper, a connection to reclaiming lost heritage. Blood calls to blood, especially Uzumaki blood. When you activated those abilities in combat, every sensitized Uzumaki descendant within 1,000 kilometers would have felt it. Her gaze shifted to Hinata, assessing the Hyuga with newfound interest. So the shadow arts survived in the Hyuga line. Fascinating. The prophecies mentioned complementary powers awakening simultaneously. We were just heading to continue our research, Hinata replied, her tone light but subtly assertive, a side of her personality Naruto had rarely witnessed. Perfect. I'll join you, Karen declared, falling into step beside them without waiting for invitation. My special is, knowledge of blood techniques will be essential for interpreting the older texts. As they departed, Naruto found himself in an unexpected position, walking between two powerful kunoichi, each now revealed to possess ancient knowledge and abilities beyond their public personas, each seemingly determined to assist his transformation into something beyond human. The journey toward becoming the Empire God had begun with violence and confusion, but perhaps it continued with something more positive: connection, partnership, and the rediscovery of lost heritage that linked them all. Behind them, Konoha's defenders began repairs while speculating about what they had witnessed. Before them lay uncertainties and dangers spanning dimensions. And within him, ancient power continued awakening, Ood calling to possibilities he was only beginning to comprehend. Chapter 1 End Chapter 2, Blood Ties. Lightning sliced through purple-black clouds as the diplomatic contingent approached Kumogakure's imposing gates. Naruto walked at the center of the small delegation, his transformation rendering him conspicuous despite modest attempts to minimize his altered appearance. The crimson gleam of his eyes had proven impossible to disguise. Chakra-based illusions simply dissolved against the interdimensional energy now flowing through his system. The rakeage will demand a complete demonstration, Samui observed, leading them along the narrow mountain path. Rain had transformed the usually treacherous route into something actively hostile, slick stone threatening to punish any momentary lapse in concentration. A's skepticism regarding mystical phenomena is well documented. Let him doubt, Karen replied, adjusting her glasses as water streamed down the lenses. Her typically pristine appearance had surrendered to the elements, red hair plastered against pale skin. Empirical evidence will speak for itself. Hinata maintained vigilant silence, her Byakugan periodically activating to scan their surroundings. 3 days of intense travel had done little to diminish her composure, though subtle signs of fatigue revealed themselves in the slight tension around her eyes. The shadow energy manifesting around her had grown increasingly responsive to her emotional state, darkening when concentration deepened, acquiring purple undertones during moments of particular focus. The storm isn't natural, Naruto noted, enhanced senses detecting patterns in the atmospheric disturbance. There's dimensional resonance in the cloud formation, echo patterns from adjacent realities bleeding through. Samui nodded, unsurprised by his assessment. Weather anomalies have increased exponentially since the sanctuaries activated. Our meteorological division documented 17 impossible weather patterns in the past week alone. The implications hung heavy between them. Dimensional bleeding extended beyond direct breaches into subtle environmental manipulation, reality itself growing increasingly unstable as the blood moon approached. Your Raikage should appreciate the urgency, then, Naruto replied, scanning the village perimeter as it emerged through sheets of unnatural rain. SA symptoms will worsen exponentially without intervention. Lightning struck a nearby outcropping, fragmenting stone with thunderous impact. Unlike natural electricity, the bolt lingered, frozen in momentary stasis before shattering into geometric patterns that briefly formed recognizable symbols before dissolving into ambient energy. Thunder Sanctuary Communication, Samui identified, blue WH. Energy unconsciously gathering around her fingers in response. The activation sequences have accelerated since your arrival in Lightning Country. The Ranger energies recognize proximity. They passed through 3 security checkpoints before reaching Kumogakure proper, each station staffed with elite Jonin whose wary assessments made clear their awareness of Naruto's altered state. His reputation from the Fourth War guaranteed respectful treatment, but the visible transformation provoked undisguised curiosity, and in some cases, thinly veiled concern. The village itself had changed significantly since Naruto's last visit. While maintaining its distinctive vertical architecture climbing the mountain's terraced slopes, new construction integrated crystalline elements reminiscent of the sanctuary structures they'd encountered. Buildings previously constructed from conventional stone now incorporated luminous blue-white material that pulsed subtly with energy he recognized as thunder affinity. The sanctuary activations affected village infrastructure, he observed, enhanced vision detecting energy flows between the new architectural elements. The crystalline components are incorporating into existing structures. An unexpected development, Samui confirmed, expression betraying unusual concern beneath her customary reserve. The integration began spontaneously after the third sanctuary activated. Engineering division cannot explain the material composition or replication mechanism. The implications registered immediately across their group. The thunder energy manifested not merely through individuals with appropriate genetic heritage but through physical infrastructure, the dimensional bleed affecting material reality at fundamental levels. The thunder fragment has likely initiated preliminary activation sequences, Karen theorized, studying the crystalline structures with academic intensity. Even without direct contact with a compatible host, the energy patterns establish environmental preparation for fuller manifestation. Similar phenomena appeared in Konoha. Samui inquired. Not yet, Hinata replied, Byakugan active as she analyzed the crystal integration patterns. Though we departed before equivalent manifestation would likely emerge. The blood energy operates through different expression mechanisms, organic rather than inorganic preference. Their discussion paused as they reached the Raikage Tower, a structure now crowned with elaborate crystalline formations that resembled traditional lightning rod configurations reimagined through interdimensional aesthetics. Guards stationed at intervals had abandoned conventional clothing for armor incorporating similar materials, their weapons likewise transformed with blue-white crystal components. Your village has embraced the changes rather than resisting them, Naruto observed, noting the systematic integration rather than haphazard occurrence. Pragmatism, Samui explained simply. Initial resistance proved counterproductive, the energy simply flowed around obstacles to establish preferred configurations. Cooperation yielded better outcomes through guided integration rather than forced containment. They were escorted directly to the Raikage's office, bypassing usual diplomatic protocols. A's preference for directness apparently extended to interdimensional matters, a TRA. It Naruto found himself appreciating as his transformation increasingly favored efficiency over ceremony. The Raikage himself had changed since their previous encounter. While maintaining his imposing physicality, subtle alterations suggested thunder energy influence, hair now permanently charged with static electricity, eyes occasionally flashing blue-white during emotional intensity, skin barren. G-tracery patterns visible only to enhanced perception. Uzumaki, he acknowledged without preamble as they entered. Your appearance confirms Samui's reports weren't exaggerated. Naruto met the direct assessment with matching forthrightness. The transformation progresses as dimensional stability deteriorates. Your village shows advanced integration patterns compared to other nations. Bako, say we've stopped fighting the inevitable, A replied, gesturing toward elaborate monitoring equipment dominating one wall of his office. Displays showed real-time data from multiple sanctuaries, energy. Y readings fluctuating with patterns. Naruto's enhanced cognition immediately recognized as dimensional frequency analysis. Your scientific approach is commendable, Karen observed, adjusting her GLA. SSES as she studied the monitoring systems with undisguised interest. Most authorities default to suppression rather than investigation when confronting unprecedented phenomena. Suppression proved ineffective, stated bluntly, activating a central display that revealed statistical projections. Weather anomalies, sanctuary activations, physiological changes in affected bloodlines, all accelerating regardless of containment efforts. Better to understand and potentially direct these changes than futilely resist. The pragmatic assessment reflected well on Kumogakure's leadership, though Naruto detected underlying concern beneath A's matter-of-fact delivery. Enhanced senses perceived subtle stress indicators, elevated heartbeat, microscopic pupil dilation, specific pheromone signatures, revealing genuine worry despite outward composure. Your cooperation simplifies our objectives, Naruto acknowledged. We seek the Thunder Fragment, a crystalline component corresponding to the sanctuary activations affecting your village. This fragment, I inquired with characteristic directness, what precise function does it serve in addressing dimensional instability? Karen stepped forward, retrieving specialized documentation from her pack. The fragment channels and focuses thunder energy, one of 5 essential components required to stabilize interdimensional boundaries during convergence events like the approaching blood moon. She presented diagrams depicting the complete psycho-crystal configuration, intricate illustrations showing how individual fragments interlock to create a unified stabilization matrix. Each fragment corresponds to specific ranger energy, she continued, academic precision dominating her delivery. Blood, shadow, healing, thunder, and feline components operating in harmonic resonance to counterbalance dimensional disruption. And who precisely controls this assembled artifact? A question, cutting directly to political implications. Which Veer nation holds such power gains significant advantage in international relations. The crystal cannot be weaponized for conventional conflicts, Naruto explained, crimson eyes meeting A's gaze directly. Its sole function concerns dimensional stability, maintenance of reality boundaries rather than political leverage. A's skepticism registered clearly through his body language. Power inevitably influences politics, regardless of original purpose. History provides countless examples of specialized tools repurposed for dominance. Which is precisely why the crystal was divided, Hinata interjected with quiet confidence that drew surprised attention from those familiar with her traditionally reserved demeanor. The fragmentation ensures no single individual or nation can unilaterally control its power. Her shadow energy manifested subtly as she spoke, darkness gathering around her hands in unconscious display of awakened abilities. Each fragment requires specific genetic harita, GE for proper activation, bloodlines distributed across multiple nations precisely to prevent centralized control. I studied her with renewed interest, noting the shadow manifestation with analytical assessment rather than alarm. The Hyuga shadow arts, historical records mentioned their existence, though most dismissed such accounts as exaggeration or metaphor. Many abilities once considered mythology have resurfaced as dimensional barriers thin, Samui observed, her own thunder energy responding to the conversation with visible manifestation, blue-white energy crackling between her fingers in elegant patterns. The Raikage's attention shifted between the visible energy displays, calculation evident in his expression. Political concerns balanced against practical necessity, sovereignty weighed against existential threat. Demonstrate, he finally ordered, rising from his desk with decisive movement. Show me these ranger abilities in controlled environment. Prove their effectiveness against dimensional instability. Then we discuss sanctuary access and fragment retrieval. The directness of the request aligned perfectly with Naruto's transformed preference for efficiency. Agreed. Immediate demonstration will establish both capability and necessity more effectively than extended discussion. The northeastern training ground has experienced significant dimensional thinning, Samui suggested. Multiple anomalies manifested there yesterday, suitable conditions for practical demonstration. A nodded approval, and their group departed immediately, bureaucratic protocols abandoned in favor of direct assessment. As they traversed Kumogakure's vertical infrastructure, Naruto noted increasing evidence of thunder energy integration throughout the village. Crystalline format. Ions had spread beyond isolated structures into systematic networks connecting major buildings, public spaces, and defensive installations. Your entire village is transforming into a thunder sanctuary, he observed to Samui as they navigated a particularly dramatic crystalline staircase that appeared recently formed rather than deliberately constructed. The process accelerated 3 days ago, she confirmed. Approximately when you activated the blood fragment. The energies recognize corresponding awakening and respond accordingly. The sanctuary network is establishing, Karen elaborated, consulting the dimensional map which had continued evolving to reflect current conditions. Similar patterns emerged historically during previous convergence events, reality reconfiguring to accommodate increased dimensional energy flow. Quote, the northeastern training ground revealed dramatic evidence supporting their analysis. What had presumably been standard combat terrain had transformed into something barely recognizable as terrestrial landscape. Crystalline formations erupted from the ground in geometric configurations that defied conventional geology, while the air itself displayed visib. La distortion. Reality rippling like fabric caught in erratic breeze. Most significantly, dimensional breaches had formed at multiple locations, small but persistent tears in space-time that occasional Lee discharged unusual energies or briefly revealed glimpses of adjacent realities. Perfect demonstration conditions, A assessed with grim satisfaction, gesturing toward the distortions. Close these breaches. Demonstrate these ranger abilities have practical application rather than merely theoretical value. Naruto exchanged glances with his companions, tactical coordination established without requiring verbal communication. Their experiences during previous dimensional encounters had developed efficient response protocols that transcended conventional shinobi teamwork. Hinata, establish perimeter containment, he directed. Blood energy already gathering around him in preparation. Karen, healing field to neutralize dimensional radiation effects. Samui, your thunder abilities should resonate most strongly with these particular breaches. Take primary ceiling position while we establish supporting framework. They moved with synchronized precision, each deploying specialized tekken IQs that transcended conventional chakra manipulation. Hinata's shadow energy expanded in complex geometric patterns that established dimensional barriers around the breaches, preventing further express action while containing potential energy discharge. Karen activated healing fields that neutralized harmful radiation while simultaneously reinforcing organic matter against dimensional distortion effects. Samui positioned herself at mathematically optimal distance from the primary breach, thunder energy gathering around her in increasingly complex configurations. Without crystal amplification, her abilities remained partially limited, raw power without complete focusing mechanism, but her innate affinity provided natural resonance with the specific distortions affecting Kumogaku. From the command position, observed with clinical assessment, attention shifting between individual techniques and their collective effect on the dimensional anomalies. Despite initial skepticism, his Ion reflected growing recognition of their effectiveness as the breaches visibly responded to ranger energy application, distortions stabilizing, reality ripples diminishing in amplitude. Naruto accessed deeper transformation aspects, blood energy coalescing around him in increasingly structured patterns. Rather than immediately manifesting the full Crimson Avatar as during previous combat, he established graduated expression, controlled evolution through progressive stages that demonstrated mastery rather than mere raw power. Blood release. Crimson framework, he intoned, establishing the foundational structure surrounding the dimensional breaches. The energy formed precise geometric configurations that mapped dimensional fault lines with mathematical perfection, identifying critical rest points requiring targeted intervention. Shadow weave. Boundary reinforcement, Hinata responded, her techniques interlocking seamlessly with his blood framework. The shadow energy flowed through channels established by his configuration, darkness solidifying into structural supports that reinforced reality boundaries where thinning had progressed most critically. Healing seal. Dimensional restoration, Karen continued. Her specialized techniques targeting damaged reality components with precise application rather than generalized effect. The healing energy functioned like cellular regeneration applied to space-time itself, repairing fundamental structure rather than merely containing damage. At the focal position, Samui completed their synchronized sequence. Thunder release. Harmonic resonance. Her thunder energy expressed dramatically despite lacking crystal amplification, blue-white power surging through the framework established by the other ranger abilities. Where conventional lightning techniques would have exacerbated dimensional damage through crude force application, her awakening abilities operated on fundamentally different principles, establishing harmonics Chi cancelled destructive frequencies while reinforcing natural dimensional boundaries. The combined effect manifested with surprising gentleness, not violent closure but gradual reintegration, reality healing itself rather than being forcibly realigned. Dimensional breaches sealed with elegant precision, distortion patterns dissolved into normal space-time configuration, and crystalline formations stabilized into harmonious arrangements rather than chaotic eruption. As the final anomalies resolved, Naruto allowed his blood energy to subside gradually, controlled deactivation rather than abrupt dismissal. The process demonstrated discipline that directly addressed unspoken concerns regarding the vampire god's legendary destructive potential. Approached with measured steps, expression combining satisfaction with lingering wariness. Effective, he acknowledged simply. More efficient than conventional containment protocols by significant margin. The ranger abilities specifically counteract dimensional instability, Karen explained, adjusting her glasses as she documented the results in her research journal. Where conventional chakra techniques address symptoms, these energies directly influence causal factors. And the thunder fragment would enhance these abilities further. I inquired, attention focused on Samui's thunder manifestation which had maintained residual expression even after the breaches sealed. Exponentially, Karen confirmed. Crystal amplification provides focus, structure, and capacity expansion beyond natural limitations. Properly synchronized with blood energy, thunder abilities could stabilize entire regional networks rather than isolated breaches. I considered this with evident calculation, weighing political implications against practical necessities. The fragment's location, the central sanctuary, Samui answered before others could respond. I've tracked energy convergence patterns across all activated sites. The dimensional map confirms primary resonance at the mountain core facility. Her direct response carried subtle significance, claiming authority regarding thunder artifacts within Kumogakure territory while simultaneously demonstrating cooperation through information sharing. A nodded approval at her diplomatic navigation. We depart immediately. If these dimensional disturbances continue accelerating, delay serves no logical purpose. The decisive response reflected pragmatism Naruto's transformed perspective appreciated increasingly. While Konoha's council had required extensive persuasion regarding basic access permissions, Kumogakure's leadership demonstrated refreshing efficiency once practical evidence supported theoretical claims. As they prepared to depart for the central sanctuary, Naruto noted subtle interactions between his companions that suggested evolving dynamics. Karen positioned herself slightly closer to him than strictly necessary, her movements conveying territorial awareness regarding both Samui and Hinata. Meanwhile, Hinata's shadow energy occasionally extended tendrils that unconsciously intertwined with his blood manifestation during proximity, automatic resonance reflecting. Deeper connection than mere tactical coordination. Most interestingly, Samui demonstrated increasing comfort with their group despite limited association, her thunder abilities naturally synchronizing with their established patterns without requiring conscious adjustment. The ranger energies recognized natural compatibility beyond individual preference, establishing connections that transcended conventional relationship development. The blood moon approached, ranger abilities awakened with increasing intensity, and relationships evolved along paths that combined ancient predestination with genuine personal choice, a complex intersection of cosmic necessity and individual free will. The central thunder sanctuary defied conventional architectural classification. Nestled within Kumogakure's mountain core, the structure appeared simultaneously ancient and newly formed, original elements dating to prehistoric era while crystalline additions manifested with active growth patterns visible to enhanced perception. Unlike the blood sanctuary they'd discovered in Fire Country, this facility had been partially integrated into modern infrastructure, Kumogakur's power distribution network. K incorporated sanctuary components as though the village had unconsciously recognized the structure's importance long before understanding its function. The sanctuary responded to village development rather than remaining dormant. Karen observed, studying integration patterns with academic fascination. Adaptive manifestation rather than static preservation. Thunder energy naturally seeks connection. Samui explained as they navigated crystalline corridors that pulsed with blue-white luminescence. Where blood energy preserves through isolation, thunder establishes networks, distributed systems rather than centralized repositories. The distinction reflected fundamental differences between ranger energy types, complementary approaches rather than competing methodologies. Blood provided foundation, shadow established boundaries, healing maintained integrity, thunder created connections, and feline, still unidentified, presumably contributed essential components to complete the interdimensional protection system. Naruto's enhanced senses detected significant energy concentration as they approached the sanctuary's central chamber. Unlike the blood fragment which had remained dormant until deliberate activation, the thunder component appeared already partially awakened, energy cycling through preliminary manifestation patterns without requiring external initiation. The fragment responds to compatible presence, he noted, detecting resonance between the crystal energy and Samui's thunder manifestation. Recognition patterns establishing without deliberate activation. The central chamber confirmed his assessment. Where the blood sanctuary had contained relatively modest interior dimensions, this facility expanded impossibly beyond conventional space, vast cathedral-like. Each chamber extending hundreds of meters upward into crystalline formations that defied structural logic. Blue-white energy flowed in visible currents throughout the space, forming complex patterns that Naruto's enhanced cognition recognized as mathematical expressions of dimensional constants. Most significantly, the chamber walls bore elaborate murals depicting historical events previously known only through fragmented records. Ancient scenes portrayed ranger activities across multiple realities, intervention during dimensional crises, civilization preservation during convergence events, and operative operations between different ranger types to address cosmic threats. Historical documentation, Karen breathed, academic excitement temporarily overwhelming practical concerns. Preserved, eyewitness accounts of previous ranger operations. While others examined the chamber with appropriate caution, she approached the nearest mural section with scholarly intensity, retrieving specialized documentation equipment from her pack to record the unprecedented historical evidence. The previous vampire god, she identified, indicating a central figure depicted in elaborate crimson armor reminiscent of Naruto's avatar manifestation, commanding joint operations during the Seven Realms crisis approximately 4,000 years ago. The illustration showed the crimson-armored figure acting diverse ranger types against crystalline entities similar to those they'd encountered during recent dimensional breaches. Most interestingly, the mural depicted direct combat against corrupted ranger forms, confirmation that the corruption phenomenon had historical precedent rather than representing new development. The corruption affected previous ranger generations, Naruto observed, dying the depicted conflict with tactical interest. Not isolated incidents but recurring pattern throughout dimensional cycles, which suggests systemic vulnerability rather than random occurrence, Hinata concluded. Shadow energy unconsciously manifesting as she analyzed the historical evidence. Perhaps inevitable consequence of dimensional work rather than external attack. The implication carried concerning weight. Corruption is inherent risk rather than preventable circumstance. If previous ranger generations had succumbed despite presumed experience and preparation, their own vulnerability required serious consideration despite current stability. Before they could explore this troubling possibility further, Samui directed their attention toward the chamber's central feature, said platform supporting crystalline altar that pulsed with increasingly intense blue-white energy. The thunder fragment, she identified, approaching with measured steps despite obvious attraction between her awakening abilities and the crystal component. Unlike the blood fragment which had remained dormant until deliberate activation, this crystal actively responded to compatible presence, energy patterns shifting from regular pulses to excited configurations that created visible distortions in surrounding atmosphere. Eager for connection, Naruto observed, enhanced perception detecting the fragment's recognition patterns. The blood crystal required deliberate awakening, but this component actively seeks compatible host. Thunder energy naturally establishes connections, Samui repeated her earlier explanation, though tension in her voice betrayed personal impact beneath clinical assessment. The fragment recognizes thunder affinity and initiates preliminary bonding without requiring formal activation. She approached the altar with appropriate caution despite the crystal's evident welcome. Unlike Naruto's experience, which had required specific blood techniques to access the fragment, the thunder component responded directly to Samui's presence, crystalline structures reconfiguring to provide access without requiring formal authentication. Different security protocols, Karen noted, documenting the distinctive access mechanisms. Each fragment implements protection measures aligned with its fundamental nature rather than standardized systems. As Samui reached the altar, the thunder fragment's energy manifestation intensified dramatically, blue-white power cascading through the chamber in geometrically precise patterns that temporarily overwhelmed conventional visual perception. Naruto's enhanced senses detected complex authentication exchanges occurring between crystal and potential host, genetic verification, energy compatibility assessment, and psychological evaluation conducted through mechanisms transcending conventional understanding. After several intense moments, the energy stabilized into controlled flow. The crystal altar reconfigured its structural composition, revealing the thunder fragment at its core, a multifaceted crystalline component approximately twice the size of a human heart, pulsing with blue-white energy that perfectly matched Samui's thunder manifestation. It acknowledges compatibility, she observed, maintaining professional composure despite the fragment's obvious effects on her awakening abilities. Thunder energy visibly intensified around her form, preliminary manifestations evolving toward more structured configurations even without direct contact. The integration process differs significantly from blood protocols, Karen noted, continuing meticulous documentation despite the dramatic circumstances. Where blood required direct command assumption, thunder invites collaborative partnership. The distinct Chion reflected fundamental differences between ranger types, blood establishing authority through decisive action, thunder creating connection through mutual recognition. Neither approach qualified as inherently superior, simply different methodological expressions serving complementary functions within the ranger system. Samui extended her hand toward the fragment with deliberate control despite obvious attraction between compatible energies. Thunder connection protocols require conscious acceptance rather than mere proximity. The fragment offers potential rather than imposing transformation. Her disciplined approach impressed Naruto, whose own experience with the blood fragment had involved less nuanced interaction, his transformation progressing through predetermined patterns rather Han offering significant choice regarding implementation details. As her fingers contacted the crystal surface, energy transfer initiated immediately. Unlike his somewhat traumatic integration experience, Samui's connection with the thunder fragment established with surprising gentleness, blue-white energy flowing between crystal and host in harmonious patterns rather than overwhelming surge. Most interestingly, the transformation manifested with distinctive visualization, thunder energy creating translucent armor components around her form rather than altering physical appearance directly. Ere his blood transformation had modified fundamental biology, her thunder integration created external manifestation that enhanced existing capabilities without requiring biological reconfiguration. Fascinating distinction, Karen murmured, documenting the procedural differences with scholarly precision. Blood transformation operates through internal reconstitution while thunder enhancement manifests through external augmentation. The thunder armor continued forming around Samui's figure, crystalline components materializing in sequential order to create protective configuration that Bala NCED defensive capability with mobility optimization. Unlike Naruto's Crimson Avatar, which had manifested as complete construct during combat necessity, this formation progressed through deliberate Tagus, systematic assembly rather than emergency deployment. The integration feels natural, Samui observed, voice carrying harmonic undertones as thunder energy enhanced her communication capabilities. amplification of existing potential rather than introduction of foreign elements. Her assessment aligned with Naruto's emerging understanding of ranger diversity, each energy type approaching similar objectives through methodologies matching their fundamental nature. Blood commanded through authority, shadow manipulated through boundary definition, healing preserved through restoration, ND thunder connected through network establishment. As the thunder armor completed formation, Samui tested movement capabilities with experimental gestures. The crystalline components responded with fluid precision despite apparent solidity, energy constructs prioritizing functional efficiency over rigid protection. Optimal mobility combined with dimensional stabilization properties, she assessed. Professional analysis maintaining priority despite personal transformation. The armor facilitates energy projection while providing environmental immunity against dimensional distortion effects. Before she could elaborate further, Naruto's enhanced senses detected significant disruption approaching their location, dimensional distortion expanding rapidly from multiple vectors simultaneously, converging specifically on the sanctuary rather than representing random degradation. Incoming breach, he warned, blood energy responding automatically to potential threat. Multiple formation points, coordinated patterns suggesting deliberate attack rather than natural deterioration. The others responded immediately to his warning, ranger abilities activating in preparation for potential confrontation. Hinata's shadow energy established perimeter monitoring that extended her awareness beyond conventional Byakugan range, while Karen initiated specialized healing configurations designed specifically to counter dimensional radiation effects. Most notably, Samui's newly integrated thunder abilities demonstrated impressive response capacity, energy networks extending throughout the sanctuary area to establish early warning systems that provided precise tactical data regarding the approaching threat. 12 distinct breach formations, she reported, thunder enhancement providing specialized sensory capabilities her previous abilities had lacked. Geometric arrangement suggesting deliberate containment strategy rather than direct assault. The tactical implications registered immediately. Rather than attacking the sanctuary directly, their opponents implemented surrounding formation designed to isolate the facility from external support while simultaneously preventing departure. AGA tactics adapted for interdimensional application. They're attempting to trap us inside, Naruto concluded, blood transformation accelerating in response to identified threat. Containment rather than confrontation suggests specific objective beyond simple elimination. The fragments, Karen realized, adjusting her glasses as she processed strategic implications. They're attempting to previous end fragment unification by isolating individual components within dimensional bubbles. The theory aligned perfectly with observed tactics. By creating containment fields around sanctuary locations, opponents could effectively prevent the ranger convergence necessary to address the approaching Blood Moon crisis, strategic impediment rather than direct confrontation. We need to break the containment pattern before complete formation, Naruto decided, tactical assessment identifying optimal response vectors. Once fully established, dimensional isolation fields require exponentially greater energy to disrupt. The Thunder Network provides potential counter-strategy, Samui suggested, her newly enhanced abilities offering specialized insight regarding electrical dimensional properties. Quote, Thunder energy naturally establishes connections across dimensional boundaries, communication channels that bypass conventional spatial limitations. The capability represented perfect countermeasure against isolation tactics, precision response rather than brute force opposition. While blood energy excelled at direct confrontation and shadow specialized in boundary manipulation, Thunder's natural connectivity provided ideal mechanism for addressing containment strategies. Establish Thunder Corridor through the forming containment field, Naruto directed, recognizing optimal application of their combined abilities. Hinata, Shadow Barrier to protect the connection point from disruption. Karen, Healing support to counter any feedback effects during breakthrough attempt. They moved with practiced coordination despite the recently altered team dynamics. Samui positioned herself at mathematically optimal location within the chamber, thunder energy gathering in increasingly complex configurations as she prepared the specialized technique. Thunder release. Dimensional corridor, she intoned, energy coalescing into precisely structured formation that extended outward from her position. Unlike conventional lightning techniques that simply applied destructive force, This specialized ability established persistent energy channels specifically designed to traverse dimensional boundary. Wise connection mechanism rather than assault method. The Thunder Corridor extended through the forming containment field, creating sustainable passage rather than temporary breach. Hinata's Shadow Techniques provided essential protection for the corridor's anchor point, darkness manifesting in elaborate defensive configurations that prevented disruptive interference. Meanwhile, Karen's healing abilities maintained biological stability for the operators, countering harmful feedback effects that conventional physiology couldn't naturally withstand. The combined effort successfully established exit pathway before the containment field completed formation, strategic victory through complementary abilities rather than overwhelming power. Their coordinated response demonstrated evolving tactica, sophistication that transcended conventional shinobi methodology, ranger abilities providing specialized solutions to interdimensional challenges. Corridor established, Samui confirmed, maintaining the connection through continuous thunder application. Stable passage for approximately 6 minutes before dimensional resistance overcomes sustainable output. Sufficient for tactical withdrawal, Naruto assessed. Already formulating subsequent strategic options. We need to. His planning halted abruptly as enhanced senses detected new development outside the containment field, energy sign. Atur registering as familiar despite lacking previous direct encounter. The dimensional corridor Samui had established provided sensory access beyond the isolation barrier, revealing critical information regarding their opponents. Harvester Prime, he identified, knowledge surfacing from information downloaded through the blood fragment. Field commander for the Harvester forces we encountered during my initial transformation. They've escalated response dramatically. The implications carried significant strategic concern. Their previous Harvester encounters had involved relatively limited forces, assessment units rather than primary combat elements. This development represented major escalation, commitment of high-value leadership assets indicating prioritization beyond standard operations. The Harvesters initially claimed to welcome my transformation, Naruto recalled, processing this apparent contradiction. Now they implement containment strategies against fragment unification. Their objective has either changed or their initial presentation was deliberately misleading. Most likely the latter, Karen assessed, consulting historical records stored on specialized equipment. Previous Ranger awakening cycles documented similar patterns, initial facilitation followed by containment attempts once transformation progressed beyond preliminary stages. Suggesting what motivation? Hinata questioned. Shadow barriers maintaining stable configuration despite increasing pressure from the containment field. Control rather than partnership, Karen theorized. Emerging EV'd. NCE suggests Harvesters historically attempted to influence Ranger development toward specific objectives rather than allowing natural awakening progression. The assessment aligned with tactical EV. Dense, containment rather than elimination indicating desire to direct rather than prevent Ranger manifestation. Their current strategy suggested intent to isolate individual Rangers, preventing unify. D-action while potentially enabling separate manipulation. We need additional information before formulating comprehensive response, Naruto decided, prioritizing strategic intelligence over immediate confrontation. Tactical withdrawal to secure position, followed by controlled information gathering regarding Harvester objectives. The corridor permits sequential evacuation, Samui noted, too. Ender energy maintaining stable connection despite increasing dimensional resistance. Individual transit rather than group passage to minimize disruption potential. Their evacuation proceeded with military precision. Karen departing first with critical research materials, followed by Hinata whose shadow abilities would provide essential perimeter security at the destination point. Naruto and Samui maintained rearguard position. Their respective blood and thunder abilities providing complementary defense against potential pursuit. As Samui prepared, final corridor collapsed to prevent enemy utilization of their escape route. Naruto's enhanced senses detected unexpected energy signature approaching their position, not Harvester forces but something fundamentally different yet disturbingly familiar. Hold position, he directed sharply, blood energy gathering in defensive configuration. Incoming entity with hybrid signature. Heart corrupted Ranger, heart, something else. The dimensional corridor rippled as something forced entry from the opposite direction, not following their established path but creating parallel intrusion using their connection as targeting reference. The entity T had emerged defied simple classification. Humanoid form composed partially of conventional matter and partially of swirling energy patterns that Naruto's enhanced perception recognized as containing Bo. Th corrupted ranger components and distinctive Uzumaki chakra signatures. Most disturbingly, the figure's face displayed partially formed features that triggered immediate recognition despite signify can't distortion, familiar characteristics that should have been impossible given known historical parameters. Impossible, Karen whispered, recognition overriding scientific detachment. That facial structure, Uzumaki genetics, but combined with corrupted ranger elements. The entity regarded them with unsettling focus, its form stabilizing into more coherent configuration as it adapted to their dimensional frequency. When it spoke, the voice carried harmonic distortions that created uncomfortable resonance patterns in conventional auditory processing. Blood descendant, it addressed Naruto directly. Corrupted energy swirling around partially manifested form. The awakening progresses as calculated. 2 fragments secured, 3 remaining before convergence. Identify yourself, Naruto demanded. Blood energy prepared for immediate combat response despite tactical preference for information gathering. The entity's expression formed approximation of smile, disturbing facsimile. Of human expression without underlying emotional content. Designation would be meaningless given current developmental stage, it responded, corrupted energy fluctuating through patterns Naruto recognized as containing Uzumaki-specific configurations. Temporary classification as progenitor proxy provides functional reference for limited communication purposes. It's using Uzumaki genetic templates, Karen assessed. Scientific analysis overcoming initial shock. Corrupted ranger elements combined with specific bloodline markers to create communication interface familiar enough for effective interaction. The entity, progenitor proxy, inclined its head slightly in acknowledgement. Accurate assessment within parameter limitations. This interface utilizes compatible genetic formatting to establish preliminary connection prior to complete convergence. Connection to what purpose? Naruto questioned, maintaining defensive positioning despite increasing curiosity regarding this unprecedented encounter. Information transfer regarding convergence parameters, the entity replied with unsettling precision. The blood moon approaches optimal alignment. Ranger awakening proceeds according to established patterns. Harvester intervention represents expected deviation within acceptable variance metrics. The clinical delivery contained concerning implications, foreknowledge of their errant circumstances suggesting either predictive capability beyond conventional limitation or direct observation through undetected means. You've been monitoring our activities, Naruto concluded. Enhanced perception detecting subtle energy patterns indicating prolonged surveillance rather than coincidental encounter. Observation without intervention represents optimal methodology during preliminary awakening stages. The entity confirmed. Direct interaction becomes necessary only when deviation potential exceeds acceptable parameters. And current circumstances qualify for intervention because Naruto pressed. Blood energy maintaining combat readiness despite conversation continuation. Harvester containment strategies threaten fragment unification timeline, the progenitor proxy explained with mechanical precision. 3 remaining fragments must be secured before lunar alignment reaches critical threshold. Current trajectory without intervention indicates probable failure. To achieve minimum viable ranger convergence. The assessment matched their own calculations regarding timeline constraints, though hearing external confirmation carried disturbing implications. Ding predictability of their current situation. These harvesters, Hinata interjected, shadow energy gathering unconsciously as she addressed the entity. They initially claimed to welcome the vampire god's return, yet now attempt to prevent fragment unification. Explain this contradiction. The entity's attention shifted to her, its energy patterns reconfiguring slightly in response to shadow presence. Harvester designation encompasses multiple factions with divergent objectives. Initial contact established by integration faction seeking controlled awakening. Current containment implement. Ed by purification faction pursuing corruption prevention protocols. Competing harvester groups with opposing methodologies, Karen translated, documenting the revelation with academic precision despite the tense circumstances. Some seeking to direct ranger awakening toward specific outcomes, others attempting to prevent potential corruption. While fundamental objective alignment exists regarding dimensional stability maintenance, the entity continued, implementation strategies create factional conflict that manifests as apparently contradictory interaction patterns. The explanation provided context for their experiences without resolving fundamental questions regarding appropriate response strategy. If Harvester factions pursued different methodologies toward theoretically shared objectives, determining ally versus adversary status became exponentially more complex. And your faction? Naruto questioned directly, enhanced perception detecting subtle evasion patterns in the entity's communication style despite its apparent forthrightness. What role do you play in this interdimensional conflict? The progenitor proxy's expression shifted to approximation of solemnity, disturbing mimicry of human emotional signaling without authentic emotional foundation. This interface represents no faction, it stated with precise intonation. This construct exists solely to facilitate preliminary communication regarding convergence parameters. Complete explanation requires direct interaction with primary consciousness, which becomes possible only after minimum viable ranger convergence achieves activation threshold. Convenient deferral of substantive disclosure, Naruto observed, diplomatic phrasing barely concealing growing suspicion regarding this entity's true purpose. Before the conversation could progress further, Samui's thunder abilities detected critical change in the surrounding containment field. Dimensional isolation approaching completion threshold, she warned. Corridor stability compromised beyond sustainable maintenance parameters. Immediate evacuation required to prevent entrapment. The progenitor proxy nodded as though expecting this development. Tactical withdrawal represents optimal response to current circumstances. This interface will establish alternative communication protocols following successful fragment unification progression. Without further explanation, the entity's form destabilized, molecular cohesion dissolving as it separated into component energies that dissipated into ambient dimensional currents rather than maintaining distinct existence. That was, Karen began, scientific vocabulary temporarily inadequate for describing their unprecedented encounter. Informative yet deliberately incomplete, Naruto finished, already moving toward the dimensional corridor which displayed increasing instability. We'll analyze implications after securing tactical position outside the containment field. Their evacuation completed moments before the dimensional corridor collapsed completely, Samui's thunder abilities providing barely sufficient sustainability to permit their escape before isolation protocols achieved full implementation. As the sanctuary disappeared behind impenetrable dimensional barriers, Naruto's enhanced perception detected elaborate energy patterns surrounding the entire facility, containment field extending through multiple dimensional frequencies to ensure complete isolation. The harvesters committed significant resources to this operation, he observed, blood energy scanning the containment configuration to identify potential vulnerabilities. This isolation field incorporates redundant systems specifically designed to counteract ranger abilities. Yet they permitted our escape rather than committing additional forces to ensure capture, Hinata noted, shadow energy extending through surrounding terrain to establish perimeter security. Suggesting containment of the thunder fragment represented higher priority than ranger personnel acquisition. Or resource limitations prevented simultaneous objectives, Karen theorized, adjusting her glasses as she documented the containment field's technical specifications. The energy requirements for facility isolation likely prevented additional operation components without compromising primary objective. Whatever the explanation, their current situation demanded immediate strategic reassessment. With the thunder fragment secured through Samui's successful integration but the sanctuary itself isolated behind dimensional barriers, their original operational parameters required significant modification. We need secure location for detailed analysis and planning, Naruto decided, enhanced senses scanning surrounding territory for appropriate options, both regarding harvester factional objectives and this progenitor proxy entity's ambiguous involvement. Kumogakure Secondary Research Facility located approximately 12 kilometers northwest. Samui suggested, thunder abilities providing enhanced geographical awareness beyond her previous capabilities. Isolated positioning with specialized equipment suitable for dimensional analysis. The recommendation aligned with their requirements, separation from population centers to minimize collateral risk while providing necessary resources for comprehensive investigation. Their group departed immediately, conscious that Harvester forces might attempt secondary containment operations following their escape from the primary trap. As they traveled rough Lightning Country's mountainous terrain, Naruto noted subtle changes in group dynamics following recent developments. Samui's thunder integration had altered interaction patterns beyond mere tactical considerations, her abilities now demonstrating natural synchronization with his blood energy despite limited prior association. Most interestingly, the thunder armor continued maintaining particle manifestation even outside combat necessity, crystalline components adapting to appropriate configuration for travel requirements rather than dismissing completely during non-emergency conditions. The thunder integration differs significantly from blood transformation, he observed as they navigated particularly challenging mountain passage. Your abilities maintain continuous external manifestation rather than internalizing during dormant periods. Thunder energy naturally establishes persistent networks rather than intermittent activation, Samui explained, the armor reconfiguring slig. HTLY as she navigated a difficult terrain feature. Continuous low-level manifestation provides optimal efficiency through maintained connectivity rather than repeated establishment. The distinction reflected fundamental differences between ranger types, blood energy prioritizing decisive application through concentrated expression, thunder preferring consistent presence through distributed implementation. Neither approach qualified as superior, simply different methodologies serving complementary functions within the ranger system. Their journey continued without immediate harvester intervention. Though Naruto's enhanced senses detected occasional dimensional monitoring attempts, subtle scanning operations rather than direct pursuit. The harvester forces apparently prioritized sanctuary containment above ranger acquisition, focusing resources on maintaining dimensional isolation rather than initiating secondary confrontation. As afternoon transitioned toward evening, they reached the research facility Samui had recommended, isolated installation nestled within mountain valley configuration that provided natural defensive advantages while minimizing population exposure risk. The structure itself incorporated Thunder Sanctuary architectural elements similar to those they'd observed in Kumovikar proper, though implementation appeared more deliberate than spontaneous, research focus rather than natural manifestation. Specialized dimensional research facility, Samui explained as they approached the installation. Established following initial sanctuary activations to investigate thunder energy properties without risking civilian exposure. The facility provided ideal operational base, isolated positioning, specialized equipment, and limited personnel presence to minimize security complications. Most importantly, its location outside major population centers reduced potential collateral damage should harvester forces eventually attempt direct confrontation. As they established temporary headquarters within the research installation, Naruto found opportunity for critical conversation regarding their encounter with the progenitor proxy entity. While others organized equipment and established security protocols, he approached Karen directly, her reaction to the entity's appearance suggesting personal recognition beyond general Uzumaki genetic markers. You recognized specific features, he observed quietly, maintaining privacy despite the limited confines. Not just Uzumaki characteristics but particular individual markers. Karen hesitated briefly before removing her glasses, unusual gesture that symbolized transition from academic persona to personal disclosure. Without the lenses, her red eyes revealed vulnerability typically concealed beneath scholarly precision. The facial structure contained elements resembling historical documentation of Uzumaki Ashina, she acknowledged finally. Clan leader during the Warring States period and principal architect of the original alliance with Senju that eventually facilitated Konoha's founding. Your ancestor? Naruto inquired, enhanced perception detecting subtle stress indicators suggesting person-al connection rather than mere academic recognition. Direct patrilineal progenitor according to clan records, she confirmed, replacing her glasses with practiced gesture that re-established emotional distance. Though historical accounts indicate he died decades before Konoha's establishment, making this entity's particularly disturbing given the temporal disconnection. The revelation carried significant implications regarding both progenitor proxy's nature and potential objectives. If the entity utilized specific historical Uzumaki genetic templates rather than generic bloodline markers, its connection to their current circumstances transcended coincidental association. The entity's designation as progenitor proxy, takes additional meaning with this context, Naruto observed. Processing strategic implications. Deliberate reference to ancestral connection rather than merely functional description, which suggests either direct historical involvement with Prevue's Ranger awakening cycles or specific interest in Uzumaki bloodline development regarding Ranger manifestation, Karen concluded, analytical capabilities reasserting despite personal connections. Beef. Or they could explore these possibilities further, Hinata approached with information requiring immediate attention. Dimensional disturbance forming approximately 8 kilometers southwest, she reported. Shadow energy extending her sensory range beyond normal Byakugan limitations. Formation patterns suggest natural breach rather than deliberate incursion, random degradation rather than targeted operation. The timing presented both complication and opportunity, potential threat requiring response while simultaneously providing test conditions for Samui's newly integrated thunder abilities. Natural dimensional breaches operated according to different principles than deliberately formed incursions, offering valuable research conditions without manufactured parameters. We should investigate, Naruto decided. Blood energy responding automatically to potential intervention requirement. Natural breaches provide essential data regarding dimensional degradation progression that artificial formations cannot replicate. The suggestion received universal agreement. Tactical necessity aligning with research objectives and ability assessment requirements. Their group departed immediately, Samui's thunder abilities providing optimal navigation through unfamiliar territory while Hinata's shadow techniques maintained advanced warning system against potential ambush scenarios. As they approached the disturbance location, Naruto's enhanced senses detected unusual dimensional characteristics differentiating this breach from previous encounters. Where earlier formations had demonstrated relatively straightforward degradation patterns, this disturbance exhibited complex oscillation, reality boundaries flexing rhythmically rather than simply thinning toward rupture. Dimensional resonance rather than direct deterioration, he observed, blood energy analyzing the distinctive pattern. The boundaries vibrate between multiple frequency states instead of simply weakening toward failure point, suggesting proximity to naturally occurring dimensional junction rather than random degradation point. Karen theorized, specialized equipment providing technical confirmation of his sensory assessment. Some locations inherently exist closer to adjacent realities, creating natural convergence zones during alignment events like the approaching blood moon. The scientific explanation aligned with information provided through crystal integration, knowledge surfacing from ancient records embedded within the fragments themselves. Certain geographical locations maintained closer connect ion to adjacent dimensions regardless of general boundary conditions, creating permanent weak points that required regular maintenance even during stable periods. As they reached optimal observation position, the dimensional resonance manifested visible distortions, reality rippling like heat waves above desert sand, occasional translucent images from adjacent dimensions briefly appearing before dissolving back into normal space-time configuration. Fascinating oscillation pattern, Karen murmured, documenting the phenomenon with specialized equipment. The resonance follows mathematical progression suggesting deliberate configuration rather than random degradation. Not random but not necessarily deliberate either, Naruto corrected, enhanced perception detecting subtle patterns invisible to conventional observation. Natural harmonic expression following dimensional constants rather than engineered interference. Before they could debate this distinction further, the resonance pattern suddenly accelerated, oscillation frequency increasing dramatically as previously stable progression destabilized toward unpredictable fluctuation. The visual distortions intensified correspondingly, translucent images from adjacent dimensions remaining visible for lengthening periods while reality boundaries demonstrated increasing permeability. Resonance cascade imminent, Samui warned, Hunter abilities providing specialized insight regarding electromagnetic dimensional properties. Oscillation approaching critical threshold where natural dampening mechanisms fail to contain harmonic progression. The assessment carried significant concern, cascade failure representing exponentially greater threat than conventional breach formation. Where standard dimensional tiers created localized damage requiring targeted repair, resonance cascades established progressive deterioration patterns that spread geometrically through surrounding reality fabric. We need harmonic counterbalance rather than conventional containment, Naruto concluded, Tactical assessment identifying optimal response methodology. Establish opposing resonance pattern to dampen oscillation progression rather th. And attempting direct boundary reinforcement. The approach required fundamentally different technique application than their previous breach interventions, precision frequency manipulation rather than general energy application. Blood energy provided foundation through establishing base dimensional constants. Shadow techniques created controlled boundary conditions for the counterbalance operation. And healing abilities maintained structural integrity during the delicate procedure. Most critically, Samui's thunder abilities provided essential harmonic generation capabilities, her newly integra. TED powers specifically suited for creating precise frequency patterns necessary for effective oscillation counterbalance. Thunder release. Harmonic stabilization, she intoned, energy manifesting N precisely calculated configuration that generated dimensional frequencies exactly counter to the resonance cascade progression. The thunder energy extended through patterns established by complementary ranger abilities, creating comprehensive counterbalance system that addressed the resonance cascade at fundamental levels rather than merely treating visible symptoms. Where conventional energy PP location would have exacerbated the oscillation problem through additional input, this specialized approach established corrective interference patterns that gradually returned the dimensional boundaries to stable configuration. As the resonance stabilized, Naruto's enhanced perception detected unusual energy signature emerging from the temporarily thinned boundaries, not hostile presence but distinctive ranger energy unlike their currently manifested abilities. The signature registered as familiar despite lacking previous direct encounter, knowledge from crystal integration providing immediate identification. Feline energy, he recognized, information surfacing from somewhere beyond conscious access. The fifth ranger component necessary for complete crystal unification. The energy signature strengthened briefly as though responding to recognition before fading as dimensional boundaries re-established normal configuration. Though fleeting, the contact provided critical direction. L indicator, general heading rather than precise location, but significant improvement over previous uncertainty regarding the final ranger's whereabouts. Northeast, Hinata confirmed, shadow energy, providing complementary detection capabilities that verified his assessment. Approximately 300 kilometers based on signal strength relative to known ranger energy propagation characteristics. Within lightning country borders, Samui noted, thunder abilities providing enhanced geographical awareness that placed the coordinates within specific regional designation. Mountain territory, near Kumo-Yugakure boundary, sparsely populated area primarily utilized for specialized training operations. The information provided next logical objective following their current thunder fragment NTEG ration. Locate the feline ranger candidate and secure the corresponding crystal component before harvester forces could implement additional containment strategies. As they completed resonance stabilization procedures and prepared return to their temporary headquarters, Naruto reflected on their rapidly evolving circumstances with mixed emotion. While operational progress exceeded theoretical projections regarding fragment acquisition timeline, emerging complications regarding harvester factional conflict and the mysterious progenitor proxy entity introduced significant strategic uncertainty. Most interestingly, the Ranger Circle continued expanding through seemingly predestined encounters rather than deliberate recruitment efforts, Samui's Thunder Awakening demonstrating perfect complementary timing despite lacking prior connection to their blood shadow healing configuration. The Blood Moon approached with increasing inevitability. Dimensional stability deteriorated according to predicted progression metrics, and Ranger abilities awakened with accelerating intensity as crystal fragments found their designated hosts through processes transcending coincidence without eliminating free choice. Their journey continued along paths simultaneously predetermined and freely chosen, cosmic necessity and personal agency intertwined through connections older than recorded history yet as immediate as individual decision. Chapter 2 End. The End. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next video.